It was a late autumn day in 1990 in the small farming town of Mapleton. The golden fields of rice were bathed in the glow of the setting sun, so bright it looked almost as if the sky were painted in blood-red hues. In the distance, a widow named Mrs. Harper stood on a low earthen path, holding a woven basket tightly in her hands. She called out for her only son, Alex, with a voice filled with worry. Alex, who was 20 years old and known for his kind nature, had gone to the stream that afternoon to gather grass for the pigs. But now, as the cool breeze whispered through the tall stalks of grain, not even a single soul could be seen near the water. Mrs. Harper's voice echoed across the empty fields. Her heart pounded with growing fear as she hurried along the stream, scanning every bush and clump of grass. Suddenly, her eyes caught a glint on the muddy bank. A rusty scythe lay abandoned there. Its sharp blade was partially covered with a single, long white hair. Mrs. Harper's breath caught in her throat. That hair looked exactly like the hair of Aunt Wendy, a kind woman who had died mysteriously 3 years before. Aunt Wendy was known throughout Mapleton as a gentle soul. Yet, her death was shrouded in mystery. Rumor had it that on a full moon night, she had suddenly collapsed in her own yard, eyes wide open in terror and a look of shock frozen on her face. Since then, people whispered that her ghost sometimes wandered the village at night, and on quiet evenings, a strange crying sound could be heard. Mrs. Harper had always been a bit skeptical about these stories, but now, clutching that white hair in trembling fingers, the old widow felt the chilling tales come vividly to life. Without another thought, Mrs. Harper grabbed the scythe and ran back toward the village, calling out desperately for her son. The wind whipped past her, and it seemed as if unseen eyes were watching her every step. Her hurried footsteps nearly tripped over the uneven ground more than once. When she reached Mapleton, she stopped every person she met to ask if they had seen Alex. But everyone shook their heads, saying they had not seen him anywhere. Her heart sank. Mrs. Harper knew Alex well. He was careful and thoughtful, and he would never leave without telling her. A dark feeling of dread settled over her, as if she sensed that something terribly wrong had happened. Night slowly fell, and Mrs. Harper grew more anxious. Determined to find her son, she began knocking on every door in the village, pleading with her neighbors to help search for Alex. Soon, a small search party formed, with villagers holding flashlights and gathering together as they set out along the narrow roads, through the fields, and into the nearby woods. The tiny beams of light looked like little stars dancing in the darkness, but they did little to ease the fear in Mrs. Harper's heart. Among the volunteers was Andy, Alex's good friend. He joined the search and led a small group along the path by the stream, calling out, "Alex, where are you?" Their voices rang out clearly in the quiet night. "Come on, Alex. We're all looking for you," they shouted. But only the rustling of the reeds and the distant barking of dogs answered them. After a long time searching along the bank, Andy noticed something unusual in the soft mud, a set of very strange footprints. They were large, deep, and oddly shaped, hardly like any normal person's footprints. His heart began to beat faster as he called his friends over to examine them. "What are these footprints? They look so weird," one of the boys asked, peering closely at the tracks. "Could these be Alex's?" another guessed. "No," Andy replied firmly, frowning. "I know his prints. These are different. And look, the tracks lead toward that dark group of trees over there." Andy pointed to a small patch of woodland, his eyes filled with concern. "Should we go check it out?" one of his friends asked softly. "Let's go. Maybe Alex is there," Andy said, and with that, he led the group into the shadowy woods. Inside the forest, the moonlight struggled to get through the thick branches overhead, and the air felt heavy with mystery. Strange sounds drifted among the trees, sometimes like the soft cry of an animal, sometimes like the distant weeping of someone in pain. The children felt a shiver of fear, but they pressed on, determined to find Alex. Suddenly, Andy halted. Ahead, under a large old tree, he thought he saw a shadowy figure. "Alex, is that you?" he called quietly, hope rising in his voice. But the figure didn't answer. It just stood silently. As Andy and his friends moved closer, they soon realized that this was not Alex at all. The figure wore a long white robe, and its long hair covered its face, making it impossible to tell who or what it was. "Ghost, a ghost!" One of the friends screamed in terror, turning to run. "Wait, don't panic," Andy said, though his voice trembled a little. "Maybe someone is trying to scare us on purpose." But even as he tried to sound brave, he took a few cautious steps forward, trying to see the figure's face better. Just then, the figure slowly lifted its head, revealing a face as pale as moonlight, with empty, haunting eyes and a slight, eerie smile playing on its lips. Terrified, the children began to run back through the dark woods, their cries and footsteps echoing among the trees. The forest seemed to close in around them as fear and confusion took over their hearts. Later that night, while heavy rain pounded the rooftops and the wind howled through the village, Mapleton was swallowed by darkness and storm. Rain fell in heavy droplets, drumming on the wooden shingles, and every flash of lightning cast strange, shifting shadows over the quiet streets. Inside her modest home, Mrs. Harper sat by the window, peering out through the rain. Her eyes were red from crying, and her voice was hoarse from calling Alex's name over and over. She had stood outside many times, hoping to see him return with the storm, but each time, disappointment followed her like a shadow. Then, suddenly, there was a sharp, loud knock on the door. Mrs. Harper's heart leaped in shock, and she rushed to open it. Standing there, drenched from the rain, was none other than Alex. His hair was messy, his clothes were muddy and torn, and dirt was caked under his fingernails. He staggered into the house and collapsed by the old wood-burning stove, holding his arms around himself as if trying to hold himself together. "Mom," Alex's voice was weak and shaky, filled with fear. "Aunt Wendy said she would take me to see Dad," he mumbled in a barely audible whisper. Mrs. Harper's heart pounded harder. She knelt beside him and hugged him tightly. "Alex, what do you mean? Your father has been gone for 3 years now," she cried, her eyes brimming with tears. Alex shuddered as he tried to explain, his voice trembling with terror. "There were so many dead people at the old graveyard hut, Mom. They were all huddled around a fire, and they tried to keep me with them forever," he continued haltingly. "They grabbed me and dragged me to a muddy pit, and they started burying me alive." Mrs. Harper's eyes grew wide in horror as she listened. She held him even tighter, whispering, "Don't worry, darling. You're safe now. I'm here with you." But even as she comforted him, her mind raced with frightening possibilities. Alex's body still trembled, and he kept mumbling about voices and faces he had seen in his nightmare-like journey. He recalled that when he was cutting grass by the stream, he suddenly heard a familiar voice calling his name. Turning around, he saw Aunt Wendy standing there, but her face was pale and empty, and her eyes looked blank. She told him that his father missed him very much and wanted him to come along. At first, Alex was excited to think he might see his long-lost father, but then the look on Aunt Wendy's face changed. Suddenly, she grew cold and frightening. She pulled him along until they reached the old graveyard behind the village. At the graveyard, a terrible chill filled the air. Alex could barely see through the thick mist. He realized he wanted to go home, but Aunt Wendy's grip tightened, and soon they arrived at a small, rundown hut. Inside the hut, Alex saw a group of pale, twisted figures sitting around a small fire. Their faces were contorted into strange, unsettling smiles, and some of them smelled terribly rotten. As soon as they saw Alex, they grinned wickedly and said that he was finally theirs, that he would be their eternal companion. Alex struggled with all his might, trying to break free, but the ghostly figures held him tightly. They dragged him to the edge of a muddy pit and began covering him with dirt. Alex screamed and fought, but his cries were drowned out by the booming storm outside. Just when he thought he could not take it any longer, he heard a loud clamor of voices outside, the sound of villagers shouting and banging on metal pots. The ghostly figures recoiled as if frightened by the noise. Seizing his chance, Alex broke free from their grip and scrambled out of the pit. He ran as fast as he could, desperate to escape the horrifying scene, until he finally reached home. Later, Mrs. Harper listened in shock as Alex described the hut, recalling that its rafters were decorated with 7 white paper lanterns, the same lanterns the villagers had made 3 days ago to honor Aunt Wendy. The lanterns had swayed in the wind, casting eerie, flickering light on the ghastly faces of the dead. Mrs. Harper shivered as she remembered that same dreadful scene, her heart heavy with fear. "Alex, it must have all been a terrible dream," she repeatedly whispered, trying to soothe him. But the mud and dirt on his clothes told her everything was real. At that moment, Andy and a few of Alex's friends arrived at the house. They had heard that Alex was back and rushed over to see him. Andy stepped inside and saw Alex in his disheveled state. "Alex, are you okay?" he asked with genuine concern. Alex looked up with a spark of relief in his eyes. "Andy, I almost didn't see you all," he said softly. Alex then repeated his harrowing story of being led to the graveyard and almost buried alive by ghostly figures. Andy and the others listened in stunned silence. They could hardly believe that such terrible things had happened. "This is too scary," one of the boys stammered. "Maybe it was Aunt Wendy's ghost," another whispered. "Maybe she is angry and is now trying to get even with you, Alex." Andy frowned thoughtfully. "No matter what, we have to find a way to stop this. We can't let anything like this happen again," he said firmly. Everyone nodded in agreement, but no one was sure what to do next. Mrs. Harper, distraught and desperate, remembered that an old man in the village, Grandpa Lewis, was wise and knew many old stories. "Let's go and ask Grandpa Lewis. He might know how to solve this," she said, and the small group, along with Mrs. Harper and Alex, set off into the rain. The next morning, just as dawn broke, the villagers gathered with torches and shovels to search the old graveyard on the hill behind Mapleton. A heavy, gloomy atmosphere hung over them as they trudged along the muddy paths. The memory of what had happened to Alex weighed like a huge stone in everyone's hearts. Andy led the group as they reached a lonely grave. There, in front of the tomb, they found a large, freshly dug mud pit. The surrounding earth had been turned over wildly, as if by unseen hands. Andy's eyes narrowed as he approached the grave. The name on the tombstone made his heart skip a beat. It was Aunt Wendy's grave. To everyone's shock, the grave seemed to have been disturbed. The soil around it was soft and uneven. Andy knelt down and examined the mud carefully. Suddenly, he noticed strange marks on the bottom of the pit, deep scratch marks made by claws or nails, as if someone or something had been trying desperately to climb out. "Everyone, come look at this," Andy shouted. The villagers crowded around him, whispering in fear. One of them asked, "What kind of marks are these? They're so strange." Another wondered, could they be from Alex's footprints? Andy shook his head. "I've seen his prints. These are different, and they point in another direction." He pointed toward a nearby patch of overgrown grass. Just then, another villager noticed something even more unsettling. "Look over there. What's that?" he asked, pointing at a piece of red cloth peeking out from the side of the disturbed grave. Andy reached out and pulled the cloth free. It was a torn piece of what looked like a red bridal veil, the kind that had been used at Aunt Wendy's funeral. Andy's hand shook as he held the cloth. "What does this mean?" he whispered. A murmur of fear ran through the group. Some villagers began to whisper that Aunt Wendy's ghost might be angry, while others insisted that it must be a trick of the mind. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harper wept quietly, her eyes filled with worry for Alex and sorrow for the past. Among the group, one older man, a local expert in old legends and natural signs, stepped forward. "It seems the energy in this graveyard is very strong. Aunt Wendy's spirit might be restless because something isn't right here," he said slowly. "But what can we do?" Mrs. Harper asked in a trembling voice. The old man replied, "We must perform a proper ritual tomorrow, gather offerings, and let the dead have their rest. Perhaps that will calm the angry spirits." The villagers nodded, though many were still too scared to be sure of any solution. Andy, however, was not so sure. He remembered that Alex had mentioned a strange smell when the ghostly figures appeared, something odd that didn't quite fit with the idea of real ghosts. As he looked closely at the disturbed ground, he noticed that the mud seemed to be bubbling. He knelt and touched it, and a faint, sour odor reached his nose. Could it be methane? Andy wondered aloud. Sometimes, decaying matter underground can produce gas that makes you hallucinate. He shared his thoughts with the others, who listened with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. A few villagers exchanged worried glances. Gas? You mean these strange happenings? Might not be ghosts at all, one asked. Andy replied, maybe the gas is making the ground unstable. It might even be causing Alex to see things that aren't really there. Though his theory made some sense, the villagers still clung to their old superstitions. In the end, they decided to have the local geological team check the area. Later that day, the geology team confirmed that there was indeed a high concentration of methane gas in the ground. They explained that the gas was produced by decaying organic matter underground and could cause hallucinations if it built up in certain areas. Andy felt a mix of relief and sadness. The scientific explanation could not erase the fear and memories that haunted him and his friends. Even though the geology team's findings made sense, many villagers still believed in the ghost stories. They continued to visit the graveyard on the 1st and 15th of every month, offering prayers and small gifts, hoping to appease any restless spirits. Alex slowly recovered physically, but the memories of that night would haunt him forever. Sometimes he woke up from nightmares, his eyes wide with terror, and he would find Andy by his side, offering gentle words of comfort. 7 days passed, and the villagers still held a vigil in honor of Aunt Wendy in a small community hall. The hall was dimly lit with candlelight, and shadows danced on the walls. In one quiet corner, Andy took it upon himself to stand guard. He sat silently, his eyes fixed on the closed coffin that lay in the center of the room. The soft crackle of the burning candles filled the air, and the faint, flickering light made the hall feel eerie. Late at night, when all was quiet, Andy's heavy eyelids began to droop. Just as he was about to drift off, he suddenly heard a soft, rhythmic knocking. Thump, 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 as if someone were knocking from far away. The sound was slow and steady, like the beat of a drum coming from another world. Andy's heart pounded. He looked around in panic, and to his horror, he realized the sound was coming from the coffin itself. His hands sweaty and trembling, he felt as if his legs were frozen in place. Mustering all his courage, he slowly walked over to the coffin and, with shaking hands, lifted the heavy lid. A terrible stench of decay hit him. In the dim candlelight, he saw Aunt Wendy's skeleton lying inside. Her left hand was frozen in a grasping position, and on her ring finger rested a silver ring, the very same ring that Alex had lost on the day he disappeared. Andy's mind went blank. How could this be? Why was Aunt Wendy's ring here? His thoughts raced back to the old family records he had heard about, the hidden secrets in the village history. Could there be more to this than a simple haunting? Overwhelmed by fear and confusion, Andy quickly closed the coffin and bolted out of the hall. He ran to the village shrine, where old records and family histories were kept. In the dim light of the shrine, he flipped through an ancient family tree. There, written in faded ink, was a story about Aunt Wendy. Long ago, she had fallen in love with a man, Alex's father, but their love was forbidden by the strict rules of society. In the end, they could not be together, and Aunt Wendy was forced to marry another. Her heart had been broken, and she died young, full of sorrow and regret. Andy closed the book slowly, feeling a mix of sadness and understanding. Aunt Wendy's restless spirit might not have been evil after all. Instead, it seemed that her pain and unfulfilled love had left a mark on the village, causing strange things to happen. But before he could process his thoughts further, he heard hurried footsteps outside. "Andy, something's wrong with Alex," a panicked villager cried. Andy's heart sank. He raced back to Mrs. Harper's house, where they found Alex lying on his bed. His face was pale, and his eyes were closed. He murmured incoherently, repeatedly saying, "Don't bury me. I don't want to die." The room was filled with worry and confusion. "Alex, wake up," Andy shouted, shaking him gently. After a moment, Alex's eyes fluttered open. He looked around, bewildered. "Where am I? What happened?" he asked in a trembling voice. Mrs. Harper rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. "My dear, you're safe now. You were taken." "I don't understand at all," she said softly. Alex tried to recall the night's events. He remembered being grabbed and muffled, then dragged into darkness. But he couldn't recall clearly being taken to the graveyard or seeing ghostly figures. His memory was fuzzy and full of gaps. The villagers were shocked. If Alex's recollection was true, then maybe the horrifying story of ghostly beings was just a dream or hallucination. Yet, the mud on his clothes and the marks on his body told a different story. Unsure of what to believe, Andy decided he must return to the graveyard one more time to find more clues and finally get to the truth. 10 years passed. Life in Mapleton slowly moved on. Alex grew into a strong, hard-working young man, working at construction sites and trying to put the terrible memories behind him. But fate had a way of returning old secrets when least expected. One scorching afternoon, as Alex and his co-workers were busy on a construction site, a sudden shout broke the clamor of work. "Hey, come over here. We dug something up," someone yelled. Alex and his friends hurried over to see what had been found. In the open bucket of an excavator lay a skeleton so white it looked almost ghostly in the bright sunlight. Its bony form was disturbing against the background of dirt and rubble. Alex's heart skipped a beat. A terrible feeling crept over him as he realized this could be connected to the events of his past. The police were called in immediately. After careful investigation and DNA testing, a shocking truth emerged. The skeleton belonged to a young woman named Lily, who was the twin sister of Aunt Wendy. It turned out that Lily had harbored deep jealousy toward her twin. While Aunt Wendy had been known for her kindness and had once loved Alex's father, Lily had always been bitter about being overlooked. Consumed by envy and anger, Lily had hatched a terrible plan. She had pretended to be the ghost of Aunt Wendy, using old stories and spooky tricks to lure Alex to the graveyard. Her goal was to use his fear to cover up her own evil scheme. Lily had carefully prepared a trap in the graveyard. She had dug a deep mud pit near her own grave and planned to bury Alex alive. Her plan was to use the villagers' superstitions and their fear of ghosts to make them believe that a vengeful spirit was at work. However, Lily had not anticipated the high concentration of methane gas in the ground. As she was about to carry out her plan, the gas exploded suddenly, and Lily was killed instantly, buried along with her own dark secrets. When Alex learned the truth, he felt a mix of anger and relief. He remembered the terrifying night when he had been dragged toward the graveyard, and he realized now that it was all part of Lily's cruel plan. The red bridal veil, which had been used by Lily to make the ghostly illusion more convincing, had been the key clue all along. It was found buried in the mud pit along with her remains. Even though the geological evidence had explained part of the mystery, the villagers still remembered the old ghost stories. On stormy nights, they would say that faint paper lanterns floated in the cemetery, as if Lily's spirit was still searching for a lost love, a love she had never confessed in life. According to the legend, Lily had once written a love letter to a local young man, but never had the courage to deliver it. Some even believe that on rainy nights, the lanterns carried her unsent letter to her secret admirer. Andy, who had been deeply affected by all these events, decided that the whole story needed to be told. He gathered his notes and memories and recorded everything he had learned, from the strange footprints in the woods to the terrifying night in the graveyard, and finally, the discovery of Lily's true identity. He wanted everyone to know that sometimes what seems supernatural has a very real explanation. The real ghosts, he believed, were the hidden secrets and human deceptions that could hurt people's lives. Years later, Alex and Andy returned to the graveyard together. They walked slowly along the familiar, weathered paths. Now, the once haunted place no longer filled them with fear. Instead, it reminded them of the past and taught them that even the scariest memories can be overcome with truth and understanding. Standing at the edge of Lily's disturbed grave, Alex and Andy looked out over the quiet town of Mapleton, bathed in gentle morning light. "We've been through so much," Alex said softly, "but I'm ready to move on and live without fear." Andy smiled and patted Alex's shoulder. "I know, buddy. We learned that no real ghost controls our lives. Only our secrets and our fears do. And now, we can leave those behind and look forward to a better future." With hope in their hearts and the lessons of the past guiding them, they walked away from the graveyard, determined to build new memories and to cherish every moment of peace and happiness that life offered. Mapleton slowly recovered from the dark days of mystery and terror. Alex eventually became a respected young man in the town. He worked hard on construction sites and even started a small community project to help rebuild parts of Mapleton. Andy, too, grew into a kind and wise friend, always ready to lend a hand or listen to anyone troubled by old fears. The villagers learned that the strange events of those terrifying nights had a clear explanation, a mix of natural forces and human greed. The old ghost stories gradually faded into memory, replaced by the understanding that many mysteries can be solved with courage and science. Yet, some nights, when the wind whispered through the old cemetery and the paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, people still felt a slight shiver of remembrance. Mrs. Harper, though forever marked by the pain of nearly losing her son, eventually found peace. She kept the sigh that she had found that fateful evening, not as a reminder of fear, but as a symbol of the truth that had finally been revealed. And every year, on the anniversary of those dark days, the villagers gathered, not in fear, but to celebrate the new beginning that had followed the storm. Andy published a small book telling the story of Mapleton's mysterious past. He wrote in simple words so that even children could understand. Even when scary things happen, the truth can come out. And with friends, courage, and a little science, we can overcome our fears and start fresh. In time, Alex and Andy became local heroes, not because they had seen ghosts, but because they had helped the village face its past and move forward. The tale of Mapleton's haunted graveyard became a lesson passed down to every new generation, teaching them that truth and hope can conquer even the darkest of nights. And so, in Mapleton, under bright blue skies and gentle autumn sunsets, life continued with laughter and joy, leaving behind the shadows of old fears. The ghost stories, once whispered in terror, became legends of the past, a reminder that even when the night is dark and the wind howls, a new dawn is always waiting to break.